Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and this is part 2 of a 3-part series all about how to start your creative side hustle. In part 1, we talked about setting yourself up for success. So we talked about figuring out exactly what you're going to sell, determining if there's actually a market for it, and if it's actually profitable, and a couple other really important questions you need to answer before you get to this part, which is logistics. You cannot figure out your logistics if you haven't done the prep work from that first video. So if you haven't done that, seriously stop this and go watch that first video. In this video, part 2, we're going to talk about the next steps. So you've figured out what you want to do. Now what are your next steps to tackle? There are about 1 million things on your to-do list when you're starting a business. So I'm going to give you the first 5 key things I suggest doing first. Okay, task number 1 is to come up with a name. And let me tell you, this is way easier said than done. For some people, it might come super easily, or they might know what they already want it to be, but for others, this might take a ton of time and thought. But you'll know when you've found it. It'll just feel right. So here are some of my best tips for working through this. Number 1, sit down and make a mind map of words. So literally anything that comes to mind when you're thinking about your future business. Words related to what you're going to be doing, words that signify, how you want your customers to feel, words that are related to your field of interest, people or places or things that inspired your business, anything like that. Circle any of the ones that pique your interest or that make you feel a certain way, and if there aren't any, then grab a thesaurus and start writing synonyms for the words you wrote. Once you have some words that you're feeling good about, think about how you can tie them together, or even just pick one that you feel really strongly about and you can run with that and start brainstorming. Number 2, tell anyone and everyone and ask them for their thoughts. Brainstorm out loud with people. It's super, super helpful. Fun fact, Ryan actually came up with my business name. It was all his doing. Okay, and some other things to think about when you're coming up with your name. First, make sure it's easy to spell and read. There's nothing worse than an awkwardly spelled business name that people will never know how to type in to search for on search engines. 2, make sure people can pronounce it easily and there's no confusion when it's said out loud. 3, make sure it's not something that's gonna box you in case you decide to change your business down the line, even if you think you won't. 4, make sure it's somewhat catchy. Ask friends and family what they think and get some honest opinions about it. Once you've finally come up with a business name you like, I'm sorry to tell you, but there's actually still another crucial step before you can totally claim it. And that brings us to task number 2, which is to secure the domain and the social media. And if they're not available, it should be a red flag to you. So in an ideal world, you wanna have the .com version of your business name as your website. And you also want the straight up Instagram handle. So for example, I have thehappyevercrafter.com and I have @thehappyevercrafter on Instagram. However, here's a little story time for you. I originally didn't want the in my business name. I just hoped I would have Happy Ever Crafter. The domain name, so the website, and the Instagram were both taken though, so I decided to switch it up and put the in it, which I actually really like now. So that's an example for you of when you start looking for the domain and the social media handles, you'll see whether or not you have to change your business name and you might have to go back to the drawing board. So if you can't secure the .com domain and the social media handles, you sort of have 2 options. Number 1, go back to the drawing board and come up with a different name or tweak it just a little bit like I did. Or number 2, use a different domain handle than your business name. Just figure out how to make it work. So for example, if you wanted your business name to be Nib and Ink as your business name, I think you can do better, but let's just go with that. And what if nibandink.com and @nibandink were taken? Well, you could check if nibandinkcalligraphy.com or nibandink on Instagram were taken. Even though those are slightly different than your business name, you could definitely get away with those as your domain and your social handles. The next big thing I'll say here is that you should also be doing a really thorough internet search and maybe even research with the trademark agency in your country so that you can see if it's already taken. Because chances are, if the website and the handles are already taken, there may already be a business like yours with that name. And that doesn't mean it's a total deal breaker, but it should be seriously taken into consideration. Okay, so if you've researched and found the name that you want and it's all available and good, then perfect. Go ahead, secure the domain and handles. And what I mean by that is 1, purchase the domain. You can do this through companies like GoDaddy or Namecheap, and it should only cost you somewhere around $10 or $20 per year to buy it. Even if you don't know what you're gonna do with it yet, or you don't know how to use it, just buy it and secure it for yourself. So a little note here, make sure you're buying a domain that offers email forwarding. They usually do, but just make sure. And this will come in handy for task number 5 later. And 2, sign up for the social handles, like all of them. Even if you don't think you're gonna use them, secure them for yourself so that nobody else can in the future. So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, you name it, all of them. Just go sign up and keep it on the back burner. All right, so you've got your business name, you've secured the domain, and you've secured all the social media handles. Now, task number 3, register your business. This feels scary, but it doesn't need to be. And no, you don't need to prove that you're some fancy established business or anything in order to register. This is different in every country, state, province, wherever you are. So all I can really tell you is to Google register business Ontario or wherever you are, and then follow the instructions. Generally, it only takes a few minutes and a pretty small fee. So that was a pretty easy task for you compared to the last ones. On to task number 4, link your domain to your email. Okay, so here's an example. Which of these sounds more professional? calligraphybyjenna@gmail.com or info@calligraphybyjenna.com. Obviously, that's a rhetorical question. It should be pretty obvious which one's more professional. It drives me crazy when a business has an @Gmail or an @Hotmail in their email address instead of using their own domain name. Why? Because it sounds so unprofessional, and because if you own a domain for your business, which you do from step number 3, it's super simple to set it up so that your domain name is used as your email address as well. The way this is set up will depend on your domain host that you used. I use Namecheap, for example, and what email server you use. I use Gmail. So once you have both of those things, literally just Google connect Namecheap to Gmail or whatever your services are, and then follow the steps. Google is always your best friend. All right, on to task number 5, set up a website. This part feels intimidating, but as someone who had never ever done anything like this before in their entire life and who did it totally themselves when I started, I can tell you it's doable. So even if you feel like you have nothing to show on a website yet, I want you to start one. Even if it's just one page people can land on when they go to yourfancynewbusinessname.com. Because have you ever gone to look up someone you were thinking of hiring and then found that they don't have a website and like you can't find them on Google? Think about it. Did that give you confidence in hiring them? Probably not. So even if it's literally just one page with one paragraph and a contact me button, now that you have a professional email address, it's better than no presence at all. So get it up and running now and then add to it and improve it later. If you're new to this stuff, I recommend starting with platforms like Squarespace or Wix. Both have some really intuitive templates you can grab, and they're pretty inexpensive. If you want to build something more powerful right away, check out WordPress. It's just a little less intuitive, but if you know what you're doing, go for it. And while we're on the topic of setting up your website, I kind of have a task 5.5 for you, and that is branding and logo. Start thinking about colors, themes, fonts, all of that for your branding, as well as coming up with a logo. If you're able to make your own logo, do it, even if it's not perfect. Same with picking your colors and your fonts for your branding. You can always adjust these things later. I spent the first 2 years of my business with a really crappy logo that I made for myself and some colors I picked on a whim, and they worked just fine until I had some money in the bank to hire a real graphic designer. Speaking of which, if you need help with the logo part, click here because I have a good interview for you with a graphic designer. Okay, and I know I said I only had 5 things, but I actually thought of a 6th. So task number 6, set up your finances. I didn't do this from the get-go, and it was a real pain to go back and organize things once I'd actually started spending and accepting money in my business. I recommend talking to a bookkeeper or an accountant about how to set things up properly for yourself, but at the very least, just make sure your personal and business finances are separated. Make yourself a new bank account and make sure that anything you spend or earn for the business goes in and out of that account, not your personal one. That's the very least. Set up your finances properly. It's gonna save you a lot of time and effort in the future. Okay, so those are my 6 do right away things if you're starting your business. I thought of about 50 more as I was writing these out, but truly I think these 6 are the most important right away. And let's be honest, these will probably take you a while and you'll probably feel pretty overwhelmed with them. So take your time and set those up. I was in your shoes and I had no idea about any of this stuff and I figured it all out. So if I can do it, you definitely can too. In part 3 of this series, we're gonna talk about how to actually start getting clients and even scarier, how to price your work. Dun dun dun. No, but seriously, It's not as scary as you think, and it's actually one of my favorite things to talk about. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss part 3 of the series, but for now, I'm gonna link you to another video that's a little pricing teaser to get you going. Good luck with all of these tasks I gave you, and I'll see you in the next video. Dun dun dun.